right, hang on 1 second, everybody. Some merch here. Let's see here. Give me 1 second, everybody. We're about to start. Can't make it? All right. Cool. I wonder. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? This is, of course, your boy Bernie here. We're just gonna wait a little bit, probably give it a little bit of time before everybody decides to come back. I think this will be kind of more of a chill stream today. We won't be doing too much things. This is just kind of news and rumors, and I kind of want to talk about. I don't know why this thing isn't focusing on me, but maybe talk a little bit about what's been going on in the U19 basketball FIBA World Cup. I've seen some tremendous players from that team, and I just think it's really important to name those guys and talk about them because they're going to be future NBA players, especially led by Chet Holmgren. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but. Like I said, we're just going to chill for a little bit, so give me just a couple of seconds before we decide to go fully live and just kind of get things going. Let's see here. Let's get over this, make sure we're live on my channel. Decide to go. All right, cool. All right, we are live and well. Alrighty, so before we get started, guys, this is, of course, I wanted to kind of also do a recap of what me and my boy Pete did yesterday for our video. Obviously, we talked a lot about the NBA draft and, who we liked in there, who we didn't like. And for the most part, we talked about, the players that we kind of are who may not be drafted in the first round, but are definitely players that you could definitely see their names be mentioned in, whether they're picked up in free agency or whether they are a second round pick. There's a lot of guys to talk about, so let us get started with that. So like I said, my name is Bernie. Thank you once again for joining me here on The Charge, giving the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. I do appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in right now. I know that this wasn't a planned stream, but I just kind of want to talk about, NBA basketball. I think, it's an exciting time right now. We got the NBA Finals going on. Of course, we got many other things as well. And so right now we are just kind of doing that, just a nice chill, nice stream. And again, guys, before we get started, we, of course, have merchandise if you guys are interested in buying merch. We have t-shirts, mugs, and I'll go to the live scene. Hopefully it's there. All right, we are live, and we have merch, guys. We have a shirt, a sweatshirt, and of course a hat just coming out. So if you guys are interested in those items, they are there. So like I said, you can buy the stuff if you want to. My other thing too as well is that there's a donation link if you guys are interested in donating to the channel. Again, it's not mandatory, but if you guys are interested in donating and supporting the channel, it is there for you guys to do there. But with that being said, I really want to go back to kind of our mock draft that both me and my boy Pete did yesterday. I thought we actually made some excellent picks, and I thought it was a really good conversation to have. And so there's a couple of players that I wanted to talk about specifically, not only just dealing with, the top picks that we have here on the board, like I said, also the guys that are on the lower end, and kind of go over ESPN and other people's mock drafts to kind of see and compare and contrast how we did versus what the other networks did in terms of what we like or dislike about it. But with that being said, this is how the first top 5, top 6 kind of rounded off. Of course, we talked about Cade Cunningham being number 1. I think that's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think he's probably going to be in that number 1 position. And let me put some music on because I know it's just me today, so we'll just kind of chill with some music in the background. So with that being said, like I said, Cade Cunningham number 1. I don't think that there's any questions about him being the number 1 pick. It's a question of there's rumors that the Detroit Pistons might be interested in trading, or maybe not themselves trading, but like the Cavaliers are interested in trading. Oklahoma City Thunder could be interested in trading. There's a lot of moving pieces here. But one thing is for certain is that I think Cade is the unanimous number 1 pick. For a guy that's 6'8", can shoot, can do anything, basically almost kind of similar to Lonzo Ball's play style. It's just hard to say that he is not a player that you would take with your first pick, overall pick. I think if you had to go back to that draft from last year, I think LaMelo Ball probably sneaks into the top 2 if I'm not mistaken. So again, I think you look at this roster, you look at everything here, that's probably something that I would go with. But again, it is what it is at this point. What's up, guys? End of a long week in the cable life. Yeah, man. Hopefully everything's going well for you, man. I know that it's been a busy day. One thing, Justin, I went to the Pro-Am today, and Zach LaVine was supposed to be there, but of course he was with Team USA, so I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see him at Jamal Crawford's Pro-Am. I was watching it with one of my friends, or 2 of my friends. So I was a little disappointed not to see Zach LaVine there, but of course, it is what it is at this point. But it was still a fun Pro-Am to watch. You got to see some great Seattle players. You also got to see some Marquise Chris. You get to see a lot of good players, so it was awesome to see. But like I said, this is of course just a chill stream. We're not going to be doing anything too crazy. But number 2, going back to our draft, because I kind of lost my train of thought. Jalen Green. This one to me is where I think the draft could get interesting in the fact that I think the clear, concise number 1 pick is obviously Cade Cunningham. After that, it's a complete just kind of throw in the dart, whoever you think could be that person. In my opinion, like I talked about with my boy Pete yesterday, I do think that Jalen Suggs should be at this pick, because I think Jalen Suggs, for what I think the Houston Rockets need, I think that he'd be a much better fit in Houston than I think a guy like Jalen Green would be, because I feel like you already have a guy in Jalen Green. Not saying that he's similar in that sense, but I think Kevin Porter Jr. could be potentially the next guy. Maybe not the next guy, but definitely could be a solidifying piece for you in Houston. So why would you want to draft Jalen Green, who's kind of in that similar boat and position where it's like that shooting guard, small forward S type of player, and you're just like, well, what does he fit? Like, what box did you check off? So again, I probably would have went Jalen Suggs, which then would have left Jalen Green to the Cavaliers. And I think that would make a lot more sense. But for what I'm seeing out there on the streets and what I'm kind of seeing out here is that when we look at just kind of like when we look at the NBA mock draft in general, a lot of people are having Evan Mobley be the number 2 guy. I think for some reason they really like Evan Mobley. I mean, not saying like for some reason like he's a bad player, but I just think that for what the Houston Rockets have, they already have a guy like that in Christian Wood. So it's like, why would they want to draft that guy? But again, maybe they're like, well, he has more upside. Like Evan Mobley has more upside. So, again, it's kind of one of those things you look at it and you're like, well, which guy do I like better? Which guy is worse? And so I think that's kind of where the Houston Rockets are at this point. And I think Jalen Green, I would say, is probably the safest bet. If I had to really think about it. I think he is the safest bet in terms of, okay, you didn't get Cade Cunningham, who's going to be like the next safest pick? And I just think that would be Jalen Green. So I definitely see, like I said, I would love Jalen Suggs. The guy Gary Parrish here in this full mock draft has him number 2 as well. I like him a lot, and I think he will be a great starting point guard for whatever team he decides to join. So in my humble opinion, I think that that's probably the pick that they should go with, but we'll see what happens with that draft selection, like whether or not Jalen Suggs will be, 2 or will he be 4. I don't think he goes to the Cavaliers. As much as I'd love, that'd be dope. Dang, I didn't realize Cade Cunningham was 6'8". Pretty casual when it comes to NCAA hoops. Yeah, Yeah, I've watched him in the tournament. Obviously, I think the coaching there and just kind of Cade in general, I didn't think he had too many weapons around him, and that's kind of the reason why they didn't go very far in the tournament. To be honest with you, I had them winning the whole thing in my mock draft, but obviously that was wrong. And so, it's not one of those things you look back at it and you're like, well, obviously they should not have won it because they didn't have the roster, or I would say maybe not the roster, but they definitely didn't have the pieces around them to win that championship. But nevertheless, I do think that Cade Cunningham is the consensus number one overall pick. We talked about, Evan Mobley. I think it's probably going to be Evan Mobley, in my opinion, just because I think they like the upside with a guy like Evan Mobley, which then leaves number 3. Again, this is by fit. This isn't by who I would take. But if I'm the Cavaliers, you probably want to take Jalen Green as kind of that solidifying player. The thing with Jalen Green is that he has such high potential and already kind of like a high floor. It's kind of one of those things you look at and you're like, well, I want to take a risk on this guy and see what he can do. And so we'll see what happens in that scenario. Again, you could potentially see, Jalen Green being one of those guys that you could be like, wow, that was a guy that we regret not taking. But, especially for the Houston Rockets' sake, I think you do have something there in Kevin Porter Jr., and I think that you need to solidify it and use that potential that you're going to see from him. So I think that's kind of something that I would look at if I was the Houston Rockets and be like, all right, we're just going to go Evan Mobley, even though I do like Jalen Green at this point. And Christian Wood, you don't know what you're going to get with him, like what his ceiling is. There's a lot of moving factors for the Houston Rockets. But again, I probably would go Jalen Suggs because I think you can really solidify using Jalen Suggs to not only get Christian Wood better, but to also get a guy in Kevin Porter Jr. who you like as a player. I mean, again, I think he's a great player. Obviously, I don't know if Seattle bias is kind of maybe not infecting my mind, but like I'm a Seattle biased person at heart. But I really do think that Kevin Porter Jr. can be special in this league. And so it's one of those things you look at it and, obviously if he has the right people around him, I think he's going to be even more special. Because he's already shown that he has flashes where he can be that guy. Maybe not the number one guy, but definitely a guy that could help you win a championship. So as I kind of look at a guy like Kevin Porter Jr., I hope he has the right people around him. And, it's up to the Rockets to decide whether or not they're going to have him being in that starting lineup, or they're like, well, we're going to move on from you. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. Again, like I said, 3, this obviously to me feels like a Jalen Green pick because when you look at it, it's one of those things and you're like, well, you already have Darius Garland, you already have Colin Sexton. It's like, what other player could you add to that lineup? And I just think Jalen Green is probably the right answer. Obviously, we're seeing the Cavs try to move up and trade away those young pieces, apparently, for Cade Cunningham. But the question for me is going to be, is that going to be enough to persuade the Detroit Pistons to be like, yeah, let's just give away a number 1 pick and we'll take Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, 2 future first-round picks and just call it a day. I just don't think that's going to be the right thing. And I just think that for the Detroit Pistons, they really need to solidify their point guard position. And just kind of for the Cavaliers, they need to solidify their kind of who's going to be their next star player. Because obviously at this point, they don't seem to have somebody there. Justin, you said, what day is the draft again? Will you do a live stream? So yes, me and my boy Pete are going to be doing a live stream that day, live while the NBA draft is going on. So if you guys are interested in that type of action, I will be live streaming with my boy Pete, whether it's on Discord or whether he's with me in person. And we're going to watch the draft live. I mean, obviously we can't show you guys the official draft, but we will talk about, the teams and the picks and like, what do we think about the whole situation? I think that'd be a fun thing to get going. So if you guys are interested in joining us, mark it down for July 29th. So that's in a couple weeks. July 29th, me and my boy Pete will be going live talking about the NBA draft. And I think you guys should be interested in watching it because I think it will be fun. So again, like I said, July 29th, I will make sure to make a official YouTube short, maybe a YouTube video even, to kind of say like, hey, me and my boy Pete, we're going to be going live for the NBA draft. And I know that I'm kind of like repeating I would say, yesterday's live stream about the NBA draft, but I think it's a very interesting debate and topic because there's a lot of moving pieces for a lot of players in this draft that could potentially be key role players for certain teams. And, you know, like I talked about, we're going to talk about a little bit about the guys yesterday that we mentioned that are kind of players that could potentially be there for a team, depending on if they're in the second round or whether they're a free agent pickup. And I kind of just want to do the top 5 at this point because I feel like that's kind of where, you know, it can go either way with everything. So number 4, I think Jalen Suggs is obviously the clear-cut, concise favorite. I think with him kind of replacing Kyle Lowry as the next point guard for the Toronto Raptors with an already great roster, I just don't think it makes any sense to not take Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs, like I talked about multiple times, whether it was in his college days at Gonzaga, kind of reviewing his game, the kid is a phenomenal player, an amazing passer, and although he may have a streaky shot, I think that he's going to get that shot down to where he's going to be able to just dominate the game. And he's one of those guys, like, he just reminds me of he's almost kind of like a hybrid between like a young Deron Williams and like a Chris Paul type of point guard, where it's like he's going to get his teammates involved, but he can also score the rock at will. And when I really look at a guy like Jalen Suggs, he just reminds me of that type of point guard. You know, we remember all the big debates about Chris Paul and Deron Williams, and like I said, I think Jalen Suggs gives me that vibe of a combination of the hybrid of those two. And just athletic. He's just super athletic. He's a super great player. And I can't wait to keep, you know, monitoring his career because I think he will be a great player. 5 and 6, and we'll just kind of combine those two together. Those ones are flip and flop. You know, you got Jonathan Kuminga and Scottie Barnes. Again, I am not so high on Scottie Barnes like my boy Pete is. I know Pete is a very big Scottie Barnes fan, or I shouldn't say fan, but he likes Scottie Barnes a little bit more than Kuminga, just because of how inconsistent Kuminga has been in the G League. But what I will say is that Jonathan Kuminga does, to me, have a better upside than I feel like Scottie Barnes. Where I feel like Scottie Barnes, like I talked about in the stream yesterday, he just reminds me of Aaron Gordon or Jonathan Isaac. Just like two really nice players, but just not the guys that you're like, I'm excited about. Whereas Kuminga, you can potentially get someone that's even better than those guys, and you can potentially get someone that could give you the next X factor on the team. You know, we talk about Cole Anthony being a great pickup for them. You also have so many other players on this roster that you could look at and be like, well, you know, we kind of like the roster that we have. But again, I think, like I said, Jonathan Kuminga to me is one of those guys you look at and you're just, you look at him and you're like, okay, this guy potentially could be something special. So again, tune in to the live stream July 29th where we will talk about the NBA draft and what is going on in that scenario. But like I said, I like Jonathan Kuminga more than Scottie Barnes, but again, that is just my opinion. Let me know in the comment section down below. Are you guys team Scottie Barnes, or are you guys team Jonathan Kuminga? Who should the Magic take at the number 5 spot? Or should they try and go and get somebody way down the line? Let me know in the comment section down below. Now, we finished talking about kind of the mainstays, the guys that we like. You know, like I said, this is our official mock draft. If you guys are interested, I got Charles Bassey as the 30th pick, Zaire Williamson with the number 15. Now, my biggest thing for me is, like, we look at the ESPN top 100 list of players in this draft. I think we talked about Dosunmu being one of those guys that is really underrated at this point. Like I said, I like Dosunmu. I think him at Illinois, they really should have went a lot further than they did, but I like his ability. I think he's going to be a great role player no matter where he goes. I think he'll be a great player. He just gives me that confidence of already a junior, kind of like Bridges for the Phoenix Suns. You know, the trade that the 76ers should not have made. I just think Dosunmu kind of gives me that same vibe of like someone that's already experienced. You already know what you're going to get from him, and I just think that he's just going to give it to you the whole time he's there in the NBA. And I just like him, man. I think he'll be a great player. Filip Petrusev, I have him being taken, but I do like his game. I think he's one of those guys, you look at it, he could potentially be something special. The question for me is, can he put on the weight to really match his size at 7 feet and a power forward? Brandon Boston Jr., another player that really should be a first-round pick. You know, he was consensus like top 10 about a year ago, has now fallen to 40. I think he's one of those guys that needs to go to the G League or needs to go to a team where he can develop and be a guy that can really just get a lot of run out there. But we know that he's probably going to need the time to get that run and give him maybe 2 to 3 years before we get that special Brandon Boston Jr. that I think a lot of teams are looking at him and being like, well, this guy could potentially be someone that we look at that we like so much. Like I said, Brandon Boston Jr., great example of, you know, a lot of hype, a lot of promise. And now it's kind of trying to figure out how do we get to there, because he didn't really show it his 1 year in college. And, you know, we kind of look at his, I don't know if it shows his strengths and weaknesses. You know, he's a 6'7" guy with a 7-foot wingspan, already a very great athlete. And, you know, the areas to improve is that he's only 185 pounds, which again, Brandon Ingram was the same way. We saw how Brandon Ingram evolved into the scorer that he is now. So again, that's something that people should be looking at. Another player that is kind of interesting for me is Deshaun Nix. I think he was another guy that was like a top 10 ESPN 100 recruit. You know, it just hasn't ended up being the guy that a lot of people thought he was going to be. You know, the strengths, according to this Jonathan Cavani post, he says strengths are good size for a guard with 6'5", 250-pound frame, fluid ball handler who operates at different speeds as well, has outstanding body control and pace, can power through defenders with a strong frame, use long strides, polished footwork, and impressive creativity as a finisher. The kind of key things that they talk about for his areas to improve is that he's not the most explosive athlete. And he's always able to create separation from defenders using his first step. Relies heavily on touch and crafty inside the arc. Which again, I don't think it's necessarily that bad, and I think that he could potentially be a decent, you know, a 6'5" point guard, 215 pounds. I mean, you want that on your team. The question for me is going to be, maybe he should go another year in the G League and see if he can develop his game a little bit more and make it more polished. You know, well, the question for me, I think for him is going to be, is it worth the money that you're going to get being a second round pick, or is it worth the money that you're going to get continuing being that guy on the G League team? That to me is going to be the biggest question mark for a guy like Deshaun Nix. Another guy that's really fallen off the draft board is Isaiah Todd. You know, there's a lot of talk about him kind of being that guy. And he just kind of fell off the map a little bit. And again, we're going to watch a little bit of a video with him. Kind of being that dude. I mean, we got here. And again, like I said, this guy is one of those guys that you look at and you're like, well, you know, solid guy, you know, big frame, everything like that, but just has fallen down the draft board, and it's just kind of crazy to think that he's fallen off that much. So that's another guy they look at. Isaiah Livers, another one. A lot of people looked at him as kind of like the guy to be kind of interested in, to see if he can't sneak into the first round. I just don't think he's there yet. And there's so many other guys as well. You know, this isn't going to be a very long stream, but again, I like my guy, Neemias Queta. I think this guy is going to be super good in the league. A 7-footer who's already 245 pounds, strong, athletic. I think that he could potentially be a player that can make an impact on any team he's drafted to. And I just think he just needs to be given the chance. And I think that through these scrimmages that we've been watching, we've been seeing, I think that teams are going to likely give him that chance to do it. And so we'll see what happens, man. I'm curious to know, what do you guys think of him? I think Luka Garza, another player that a lot of teams are looking at. You know, this is kind of one of those things to look at. Luka Garza, look at his strengths, look at his weaknesses. Low post scoring, obviously one of his biggest, I would say, biggest strengths. Obviously him being in the low post, handling it. It's one of those things you look at it and you know, it's an old school game. And that to me is going to be the biggest question mark for a guy like Luka Garza. Is that game going to translate to the NBA? Obviously being 6'11", maybe he could be the next Cody Zeller. Who knows? But what I am kind of curious about is more so is, you know, what's going to be the ceiling for a guy like Luka Garza? Because I know that a lot of people are kind of looking at him and being like, well, is he an NBA player? Is he not an NBA player? And that's kind of the biggest question mark going into next season. Greg Brown, another guy teams are looking at. You know, we talked about him being another great player. Joel Ayayi, like I said, this guy to me, clear cut. This guy should be on an NBA roster. I don't care what anybody says. This guy is so freaking good. Knows when to cut. Always, shoots the ball particularly so well. And again, as a 6'4", kind of shooting guard, point guard type of player, he knows when to back cut. He knows when to attack the lane. He's the energy guy that Gonzaga needed, especially with the way that their season went down in the tournament, where you didn't get really much from guys like Corey Kispert, who was very inconsistent in that NCAA tournament. Jalen Suggs, who can also be inconsistent at times. Not saying that he's like the worst player in the world, but like Joel Ayayi just was the cool, steady. You could rely on him whenever you needed a bucket. And again, I just think that his three-point shooting, I think that him in general, I think you're going to get someone that you could look at and be like, damn, this guy could be a really good player on my team, whether he is in the Jay Crowder role or whatever role he decides to be in. I really like him, and I think that everybody should be looking at a guy like that to join their team. And if I'm in the Boston Celtics, I'm not sure if they have a second-round pick, but that's a guy that I would look at. Jason Preston, I know that he was in the scrimmage. We'll kind of look at his game a little bit later. I want to watch him a little bit more to kind of get my takes and analysis. Again, another guy, Josh Christopher, the bucket getter. This guy is really freaking good, man. I like this guy. I know that this is, I'm not sure which YouTuber this is, but to me, I think Josh Christopher is a scoring elite player. Like the way that he's able to score the rock, the way that he's able to attack the rim. This is a guy that you want on your team. It's kind of like that Jamal Crawford, kind of Lou Will, 6-man, can come off the bench, get you buckets type of guy. And again, like you look at his ability, 6'5", 6'8" wingspan, does a lot of great things on the offensive floor. And again, is an instant bucket getter. I don't care what anybody says. This guy will make a very huge impact in the league. We kind of moved to guys like Quentin Grimes, which we already have drafted. I really like his game. But in terms of like guys that are kind of down the list a little bit, let me see if I can find the guy that I was talking about a couple days ago. Let's see if I can find this guy. I think it's here. And I'll just kind of have here. Let's go here. So this is another guy that I think a lot of teams are looking at. Shout out to Adam Spinella. This is a guy that a lot of people are looking at as kind of like an X Factor type of player. Franz Bellichberg. I probably butchered his name, but as a 6'10 guard with passing ability, able to attack the rim head on. You kind of look at a guy like this and you're like, this guy's kind of almost like a demigod at this point. Like the way that he's able to play the game. And I like his game, man. I think he's one of those guys, you look at it, not necessarily the quickest, but is so long enough, so skillful enough that he can make those passes. I mean, he's kind of like the modern day forward that you need on your team to kind of help you win a championship. So if I'm one of these teams looking at it, trying to see who's going to be the next kind of player to help me win a championship, that is the guy I'm looking at. So, that's kind of one of those things, again, could be like a Saric to me, where it's like he really, really helped the 76ers when they had him on the roster. So to me, I think that's kind of the person that I would look at if I'm one of these NBA free agents. But nevertheless, we'll see what happens. And again, sorry for the kind of short stream today. Kind of just wanted to do a kind of recap of what we talked about yesterday, especially from the top 5 and also kind of the players that we like in this NBA draft. But with that being the case, thank you once again for joining me here on the Charts, giving the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Also, guys, remember we do have merchandise. We have a donation link, so if you guys are interested in buying merch, there's a merch store with the sweatshirt, a t-shirt. Again, t-shirt probably looking more like this. Maybe even you might want to get the spot gray. Who knows? And of course, we have the sweatshirt as well that you guys could be interested in. I'm not sure if my chair might be in the way, but nevertheless, thank you once again for joining me here on The Charge. Like I said, giving the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. Please remember to hit that like, share, subscribe button, buy the merchandise if you want, and we'll catch you guys